Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, what do I want for the Toronto Maple Leafs moving forward this offseason? And I also want to know what you guys want as well. But hear me out here because we're going to talk about a lot of things. And on the screen right now is a skeleton. It's got some question marks, it's got some placeholders, it's got some younger players, and by no means are the lines what I want them to be. We're going to talk about it and go through it throughout the video. I know talking about Kerfoot is not the sexiest place to start, but it is the place to start if we want to figure out whether or not we can count on having $3.5 million more to spend. And I know, some of you are probably sick of hearing me make this point, but for the majority of the season, they played Kerfoot as their shutdown centerman. That is just not what Alexander Kerfoot is. I know it was only in 7 games, but his role in those 7 games changed drastically. He went from being a shutdown centerman to a center on a scoring line, for the most part, with Alex Galchenyuk and William Nylander. Watching that series, I think everyone can agree that he just looked like a completely different player. So my stance on Alex Kerfoot is if they decide that they can get a similar player for cheaper, then move him. But if you can't, I would like to see him back with the team next year, playing in a different role. I'd like to see him on the penalty kill and in a middle 6 scoring role, either up the middle or on the wing. I don't care. Ilya Mikheyev was a really frustrating player to watch, but also exciting at the same time last season. He would dart into the zone at like 100 miles an hour, his hands wouldn't keep up with his feet, but hey, a lot of the times he would generate some sort of scoring chance. What's on the screen right now is forwards in the NHL last season that played a minimum of 200 minutes at 5-on-5, so about 20 games or so, sorted by independent scoring chances per 60 to just level out the playing field. And Mikheyev is 71st on this list out of over 400 players. And leading the charge here, you got guys like Matthews, Gallagher, Tkachuk, Mir, Zach Hyman, which hurts, but hey, John Tavares in 8th. If you can recall Zach Hyman's first couple of seasons in Toronto, that guy got a hell of a lot of scoring chances. But he didn't bury too many of them. I wouldn't put money down on it. I'm not calling it a sure thing. The one thing I am saying is that I would be patient with Ilya Mikheyev. Pierre Engvall, I'm not even going to really waste any time talking about because you can place him on waivers. If he gets claimed, he gets claimed. If he doesn't, it's only going to cost you $125K, and he's at least depth for the penalty kill. He can play 4th line center. He's a decent player on the fly. He's depth. So because he's guy and just depth and not someone who I want on the roster, he's not going to be on my roster because I'd rather have the cap space. If you want to know more about who that $4 million placeholder on the first line can be, I did a video talking about some forwards that I think the Maple Leafs should target. One of those guys. What do I want to do with the remaining couple of spots on this roster? First things first is we need a new shutdown center. I think any one of these 3 guys would be great, but if you ask me, I think the Maple Leafs did some housekeeping when they acquired a guy like Riley Nash at this year's trade deadline. He shoots right-handed, which is something the Maple Leafs don't really have a lot of when it comes to centermen. Matthews shoots left, Tavares shoots left, Brooks shoots left, Kerfoot shoots left, and he's just the literal definition of a black hole. Nothing happens when Riley Nash is on the ice. And I don't think it's fair to judge Riley Nash in the 1 or 2 games that he played against the Montreal Canadiens because 1, he was coming off of an injury, and 2, it was the Montreal Canadiens. They're not necessarily a team that takes the puck to you. They wait for you to take the puck to them, and they force a turnover. They force you to make a mistake. That's literally their whole game. But had the Maple Leafs had made it to the second round and played a team like the Oilers or the Jets, I think a guy like Riley Nash would have paid dividends. And next year in the Atlantic Division against a team like the Boston Bruins or the Tampa Bay Lightning or the Florida Panthers, I think he does there as well. How much does he cost? No idea really, but if it's anything more than $1.5 million, then I'd have to reconsider and move on to someone else. Now, the $3 million placeholder on the third line, I would really like for that to be Nick Bonino. I think if that's anywhere between $2 and $3 million on a 1-year deal, I would love for him to come back. He's a guy who can fill in on the penalty kill. He's a guy who plays really hard and is just really easy to cheer for. He also had some chemistry with Matthews and Marner in some limited ice time. I think it would be good if Nick Foligno came back and he got a second crack at things. I'd be interested in bringing back a guy like Zach Bogosian. I'd be interested in bringing back Travis Dermott because, again, a guy like Justin Hull would be selected in the Seattle expansion draft, and you have some money left over here. And this is where the philosophy of not necessarily needing to have the team that wins you the Stanley Cup on opening night really comes into play. We didn't play out the full 1920 season, but that was the last full year that the league had scheduled. And in that season, there were 186 total days. The trade deadline fell with 40 days remaining in that 186-day season, which means if you went into the 1920 season with $570,000 in cap space, at the trade deadline, you can prorate that out to $2.65 million in face cap hit value. And how I'm getting that number is I'm taking $570,000 and dividing it by the number of days that are left in the regular season at the trade deadline, which is 40, and then multiplying it by how many total days there are in the regular season, and that's 186. And that means that a player with a face cap hit value of $2.65 million at the trade deadline has $570,000 still owed to them. That's kind of the simple way of looking at it, but the more accurate way of looking at it is on a daily basis. So if the salary cap is $81.5 million and the season is 186 days long, that means that you have $438,172 that you can spend each day. A guy like Matthews on a daily basis takes up $62,500 of that $438,000, and you'd have to do that with every single player and add them all up, and it has to be under $438,172. But let's say one day you only spent $430,000. One day you only spent $400,000. Another day you spent $500,000. Oh no! Every day that you're under or over by a dollar or two, it either adds or subtracts to this total. The remaining amount of cap space in the corner here would accumulate daily if the Maple Leafs were to have the same roster and have no injuries and not call anyone up at about $3,000 a day. And if the trade deadline was on day 146 of the regular season and they accumulated $3,000 every single day, you would multiply that number by how many days you are into the season when the trade deadline happens, and this is how much extra money your team would have to work with. And then you would add that total to the face cap hit that you entered the regular season with, which means that you would have $1.017 million in cap space. But again, you would need to divide that number by how many days there are remaining in the regular season, and then multiply that by how many days there are in the season in total, and that's how much money in face cap hit value, so just a player's annual average value, that you would be able to add at the deadline. The salary cap is simply something you either get or you don't. And I might have explained all of that wrong, but I don't think I did. I think I explained that correctly. The best way to interpret it, if you're a math person, is that it's an average. It's an average of what you spend every day, and it's cumulative until the end of the regular season, which is why LTIR is so bad if you can't take advantage of it the way that the Lightning did this year, and loosely the way that the Leafs did this year as well. And that's not even factoring in if you were to get 50% salary retention or double salary retention, which is what the Lightning did with David Savard and what the Leafs did with Nick Foligno this year, where there's a third-party team that also retains 50%. It does involve some luck on the injury front, but for the most part, you don't need a lot of space to be able to add big at the deadline. And before and at the 1920 deadline, the Tampa Bay Lightning surrendered 2 first-round picks and another prospect who was drafted in the first round for Barclay Goodrow and Blake Coleman. Those were rental players who had 2 years each left on their deals, but they won the Stanley Cup last year, and they're in the Cup Finals this year. You gotta be willing to spend, but also spend smartly. which is why I'm okay with having a guy like Liljegren in the top 4 to start the regular season. He gets to play next to a guy like Jake Muzzin. Who better than to mentor him than probably the best two-way defenseman on the Toronto Maple Leafs right now? And if that works out, great. That works out. If it doesn't, acquire someone else at the deadline. You can have the space to do it. But if it does or it doesn't, that doesn't change the fact that you should still add at the trade deadline, because that's how you build depth that wins in the playoffs. You take a guy that's doing just fine, maybe in a top 4 role or in a middle 6 role, and you acquire someone else who is better than them. And that bumps everyone down in the lineup, so that if there's an injury, you can go back to having the same depth that you had before. But if there isn't, you got yourself one hell of a scary lineup. But lately when I've sat down to do these videos, I don't really know what to say. And that's because literally none of this matters if guys like Matthews and Marner don't produce in the playoffs. They outscored the Habs without those two on the ice 17-14 in the series, and Jack Campbell played right along with Carey Price. They were a goal away in both Game 5 and 6. All they needed was one more goal, and they only got one goal in the 7 games from either the guy who won the Rocket Richard Trophy or the other guy who finished top 5 in scoring. I don't really know what you can say about what a team needs to do and doesn't need to do in the offseason when that's what you're looking at. But as I've said at the end of these videos the last while, I will be here to either talk about the Leafs or something else. I know I've teased talking about the Blue Jays, and I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to do that or not, just because there's some downtime right now with hockey before things really ramp up again, and I might just want to take some time to, I don't know, go outside. go outside. That shouldn't be funny, but you know, the way that things have been the last year and a half or so. But I want to say thank you, because like I said, I'll be here because of you guys. This is not just me doing this for myself. This is not just me doing this so I have something to say to some buddies. This is special. This is so much more than that. And January of 2020 is when I really started putting a lot of effort into this. And we had about 300 subscribers at the time, and we were getting about 100 views every video, and I would be checking it and watching it go from 80 to 90 to 100, and I would be so absolutely thrilled with myself with just that. And if it stayed as that, I would still be doing it, because this team is crazy and you need an outlet to be able to talk about it, especially when you're in it as deep as me, as I'm sure a lot of you are the same. The fact that I'm in school to be a journalist, to possibly cover a hockey team in some sort of capacity one day, to have this behind me, to have this experience, to have you guys as well, it just means the world. Really. I mean, there's 4,700 people subscribed to this channel now, and that is that blows my mind. Blows my mind that I can upload a video and it gets not just 100, not just a couple hundred, not just 1,000, not even a couple thousand. Sometimes it's 4 or 5 or 10 or 25, like a video 2 weeks ago. It's just, it's crazy. It's crazy. How do I end these videos? Make sure to like the video if you did like it, and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. And guys, I will be here.